Talking about schemes. So what's the cons of shared ownership?
Shared ownership. The cons. So what do you know about shared ownership?
So I'll tell you what I know.
Yeah.
And this is just what I know.
Yeah.
So I know that. So a lot of flats, for instance. So let's say Newham, where we've grown up. You know, you look at places like Beckton, Canning Town, Stratford. They've got all these new brand lush properties set up in these nice new developments, and a lot of them are being offered out on shared ownership, meaning that you basically own a percentage of the property, not the full percentage. So it could be 25%. They may give you a set percentage and say it's 30% with no possibility of it increasing or possibility of increasing. However, the contract might possibly work. And so what that means is where you're paying for. So when you live in the flat, you'll be paying rent, but then you'll also be paying an additional amount on top of that. That will be your mortgage payment, basically. And so obviously if it was 50% of the flat that you owned, you would then the amount of money that's coming out of your account will then be, I guess, a portion of your mortgage and your rent, but it's only 50% of the total value of the actual property, right? So what are the pros and cons of that? Because there's a bit of a stigma amongst the people that I know around shared ownership, and I think it's purely just because, again, it comes down to but you don't own the whole property, whereas actually I hear stories of people that find a way to maximize on the shared ownership. So you could talk a bit more about that. What does that look like?
So when it comes to things like this, I always look at it like this. We can always go really, really deep, and I'll go deep just to give you an idea as to my rationale behind this. Every property that you own ultimately is owned by the Queen. Yeah, let's just keep it 110. So you are a freeholder. You know what I mean? Have you heard of the term freehold?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know that's an insult sometimes when they call you a freeholder, a freeloader, because it's a case of you're just holding this for free for the time being, but you're holding it for somebody else. Mm-hmm. You understand? So all the land on this, all the land that you have your house on is technically owned by the Queen via the government. Mm-hmm. Hence why you pay, council tax and you know what I mean. You have to pay certain taxes upon you sitting on the land. So this is just another level to it. Do you understand? So either way, you're not going to ever own anything outright because everything on this land is free. And effectively, what once was free is owned by the government and you pay taxes for that. So that's all just basically, what's that word called? It's basically an image thing, if we're being honest. Because in reality, you don't know what's coming out in terms of my bills. And why would I care what you think about my ownership status when we all ultimately don't own anything outright like that anyways. So that's already a situation where, as an advisor, I wouldn't touch upon such opinions because it's a case of, come on guys, you know what I mean? Do you want a house? If you don't want to do it that way, then you don't have to do it that way.
Just to clarify on what you've just said there, then, so if someone's paying their mortgage for 25 years, which is like a normal, amount of time for people to pay off are you saying essentially at the end of that, you own it, but you don't own it because the Queen and the government own it?
Listen, I know. I'll use this as an example. You can have a house that you own, outright, and you want to do something to your yard. There's a thing called planning permission. Who are you getting planning permission off, my guy?
The government.
Then what's the wahala about shared ownership? I understand it from the point of view that if it's personally to you, but not if it's people watching you that, you know what I mean? If it's that, I'm just like, allow that. But if it's a case of you just personally want to own the property and you don't want to pay rent, that's different. I get you don't want to pay rent. But in terms of the whole, I want to own something outright so people can, that's fugazi from my mind, because ultimately you're gonna have to get permission for somebody for something at some point for everything you're doing in regards to property anyways, because ultimately you have to pay people. So if you wanted to do, for example, a loft conversion or a extension, you'll have to look at planning permission rights first and foremost. So and that's if you don't even have a mortgage as well. With mortgage or without mortgage, you still have to go to, because the government want to know what you're doing to your place. Because if it affects the way it looks, it affects the
structure and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. So those restrictions are always going to be there. I'd say the one thing with shared ownership is the fact that usually with shared ownership, there's usually flats, usually leasehold, and obviously you have to pay rent. Now, in terms of affordability, you could get situations with shared ownerships where the affordability matches somebody else that's paying a mortgage, like what you said, on a 25-year deal kind of thing. So with shared ownerships, my take on shared ownerships is it's just a stepping stone. I always feel like if you're doing a shared ownership, it's really just a stepping stone, just to what's that word called? Just to get your foot on the property ladder. You understand? So I never look at it like, oh my gosh, you don't own the property. You can, a lot of the shared ownerships, they call it staircasing, where you can have the right to buy more shares. So usually a lot of people staircase, and some people don't staircase. And if you don't staircase, fair enough. The little share or the big share that you've purchased of your own equity, once you sell that property, you'll get that back plus more. So it's just a stepping stone at the end of the day. Some people have made it work and they've staircased all the way to the end. I've helped, like, I've had applications, I've helped ladies and clients that I've had in the past staircase to 100%. It's possible. But ultimately they still have a little bit of mortgage left anyways, hence why, I was involved in the transaction, you get me? So shared ownership's just another scheme. They're all schemes at the end of the day. They're all schemes, and it's more, with these schemes, it's more about your circumstances, because I've seen situations where shared ownerships work perfectly for people, because the shared ownership, what they're paying rent plus mortgage is less than what people are paying rent. It's less than what I've seen mortgages wise. Understand? Then I've seen shared ownerships for other people where it's like, brother, this is dead. Don't even do it to yourself. It's sad. You're paying 2 bags for nothing, bruv. You know what I mean? You're shaking
that 2 bags would be their mortgage,
bruv,
and the rent,
bruv,
but then they own 25% of the whole property.
It's mad for them,
which is more than normal rent of the average cost of rent in London.
So with all these schemes, you have to understand, especially with finance, it's more about, do the clothes fit you, not about the clothes itself. There's no such thing as a bad scheme. It's about, does that scheme fit you? Because a man that's on a certain amount of income, or a man that's got a certain amount of children, or a man that's got a certain age, certain things will work for them for certain schemes. But certain things from the next girl or the next man won't work. So the way people should look at finance, they have to look at finance very selfishly. Forget about the schemes. Honestly, the schemes are just schemes. There's gonna be new ones. They're gonna change them. They're gonna chop and change them, mash them up. The shared ownership schemes in Newham are completely different from the shared ownership schemes in Redbridge. The shared ownership schemes in Redbridge are completely different from the ones in Greenwich. They all have different rules. Notting Hill housing will do some in certain locations, and they'll have their own rules on Notting Hill housing. Then another housing group will have their own rules on that one as well. So some shared ownership schemes require you to be a certain profession. Some shared ownership schemes have a minimum amount that you have to put in. Some shared ownership schemes have a minimum amount of salary you have to put in. So it's all about, really and truly, do the clothes fit you? So for some people, shared ownership scheme is dead for them. So some people, it's perfect. It works for you. In fact, this is your saving grace. Understand? So the way finance, and I get it, because I get, I speak to a lot of clients a lot of the times when it comes to finances. Everyone looks at finances more so from a materialist point of view, where it's like, what's the interest rate? What's the scheme? What's the deal? What's the loophole? What's da-da-da-da? But they don't ask themselves the question of, what's my income situation? How long have I been at my job for? What, am I on probation? Do I receive bonuses? You understand? That's the way I'm looking at it as an advisor, because the market is there. The market's like Googling. It's like Wikipedia. And I read. You can do it. I can do it. The idea is more so knowing you, and you need to know yourself as well.
Your capabilities.
Exactly. Know your capabilities, because if your capabilities is such that shared ownership is dead for you, you'd know that. But if your capabilities is that it's not dead for you, you'd know that as well. But a lot of people, what you tend to find with the finance game is they don't know their situation. So for them, everything's a mystery. Once you know your situation, some people, I look at them and I'm like, why are you looking at shared ownership, bruv? You're caking, bruv. Go buy a house, cash. They even get mortgage. They even take mortgage from me. I'll be ripping you off, my guy. Like literally, you see some people like, what you doing getting a mortgage, my guy? You know what I mean? But obviously, it's all about the person's situation. You understand? So once you look at your situation, some situations, the case of shared ownership will never work for you. You know what I mean? Some people's situation, oh my gosh, it's your savior. So with financing, this is the big thing, a gem I'll drop for people is about your circumstances. Right. You know what I mean? It's about how much you earn. Because a lot of the time, the lenders and the banks and the schemes, they want to know what your situation is, because they've got a yay and nay box basically. There's no maybe with them. So even with the shared ownership scheme, not everyone's going to be eligible for it. You know?